Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Scott. I'm with Virginia Western Community College in Roanoke, Virginia. I was at our Cisco ASC meeting recently and ran into Steve Baker, who is a professor out there at Eastern Carolina University. And he hosted this really cool seminar about having fun with Packet Tracer. We got into the topic of building self graders and kind of taking it a step further, about getting into the variables and using pools. That way, you can kind of create dynamic networks that kind of give our students a little challenge. That way, if they find an entry key, you can kind of make it invalid, where they have to kind of use their skills. So what I've done, and this is what I typically do when I build these self-grader deals, I will build a one version of it where it's complete, where it has the entire config done, and then I'll have the initial, which is the topology with nothing done. And I have this little file here called config and more, and this basically has some basic configs for my three devices. You can kind of see that, and then it's got this little wonderful little regular expression that I can use in the self grader, so I can accept any input for things like banner messages, description messages, where I really don't want the student to be hung up on mistyping something and something like that. So I kind of leave that kind of open using that. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go ahead and open up the completed one. All right, hopefully I don't have anything messed up on this. And then I'll go ahead and hit Control W. Let me find it here. There we go. Control W is how you pull up the keyboard. I always struggle looking for it in the menu bar. It says you want to use this as your entry network. Absolutely. And actually, I didn't even have to open this up. I could have just gone straight into Control W. I could have pulled the entry network in using a import, which a lot of times I do. Now I'm going to wait. If you've used this before, where you start kind of choosing things, like if I open up the router and I look at ports, you'll see that I've already got an IP address in there. I'm going to wait to start checking on the things that I want to check for. So I want to cover the really I want to do the variable manager, first, and then I can go into doing all the other stuff. I do need my initial network. I don't want to copy it from the answer network because then I have to clear everything out. I already got a file for that, so I'll import file to the initial network. And there we go. And it's pretty much the same. So that's the initial network. Let me slide this over and see if I can have it where you can see both things at the same time. If I go to the answer network, you see it's the same thing. The positioning of these little labels might be a little different because I forgot to add those. And I had to add them in after the fact. All right, so the goal, the hope, the dream is to change the name of these devices, change the IP ranges of each network, so it's different every time the package tracer is opened or is reset. So that's kind of what we're going to tackle. Now the variable manager is where you do all this stuff. It's really cool. You may find this intuitive. I did not. Um, I watched the tutorials that they have out there, which is right there. I watched them. They were marginally helpful. What really helped me to kind of dig into this, and I'll show you the one I opened up. I opened up, well, actually I don't want to do that right now. I'll just show you the one I opened up. This one right here. So 8214 from ITN, the first class. This has a really good example, and 11245 does as well. Both of these from ITN have used the variable manager, so it's kind of nice. And so that's kind of what I did. You probably do want to turn this on. Now I'll show you what that does in a minute. So I'm gonna leave it off for now. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to seeds, and this is an important thing if you want to say have three different names of router, three different names of switches, and kind of keep them in sync with each other when it picks, of one of the three names. So I'm going to create a seed called name index, starting with 0, going through 2. So I got, three different indexes there, 0, 1, and 2. That's going to come in handy. Now, they have variable pools and variables for numbers, for strings, and IP addresses. And there's some cool things you can do with the IP addresses one, but I'll save that for a different video. I think the most gold you want to have in this is working with strings. That's a little weird. You do need to have a pool before you have a variable, even if you only have like one value. So, for instance, a subnet mask. So let's say you're not doing subnetting and your subnet mask is always a Class C subnet mask. You can't just build a variable with that mask in it. You have to create a pool first, which is a little weird. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to start typing in a pool name. And what I started doing for pools is just kind of doing a P and an underscore just to make life easier on myself because the names just start getting ridiculous. And I'm going to call it router names. And then on the text box here, I'm going to type in, three different router names that I might want to use. So maybe I want to do router 01, and then a semicolon, which is the delimiter. Say I want to do R01, semicolon, RTRA, okay? So it's a pool that you can pull one of three different names. I'm going to do one for, I only have one router, so I just kind of kept it general. And no, I did not type a space there. It's just weird font thing. So S1 names, I'm going to do switch 01, S01, and I'm trying to keep the names consistent. So if you pull a scenario that has router 01, then your switch should be switch 01, and the second switch would be switch 02. And if you pull a scenario with router A, you'd want your switch to be A and the other one to be B. That's the goal. And we're going to go switch 02, S02, SWB. Alright, cool. So I got three pools. That just covers the names. Haven't done anything with the IPs of the devices. You're going to have a bunch of pools. You're going to have a bunch of variables if you want to use them. Now the variable name, this is where it's going to be where we're going to start using it to populate these values. So I'm going to create a variable name just called router name. Then you got to choose which pool that you're going to pull from, and I'm going to go with router names. So it's going to grab, one of these three names. You can do it randomly. You can do it by position. So if I did 0, it would grab router 1. If I did 2, it would grab router A. Right? You can say entire range, which probably wouldn't be super helpful for this example. I can show you that. That's better if you're using IP addresses. That means anything is acceptable, which is kind of cool if you want to leave it open like that. But this is where it gets really slick. If you leave it random, and let me just leave it random for now, and I'll show you what it does. I need to do switch 1 name, switch 2 name, alright, great. Now the other thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to I don't have any slick way to get this variable over into the topology here. So I'm just going to hopefully copy and paste it. So you got to do a double bracket on either side of this. And that says replace this name with the variable value. And I don't know if I might need to do this on the other one too, on the initial one too. I almost guarantee it. I probably could have left alone on this one actually. I really should have done this on the initial one. Oh well, let's see what happens. Yeah, yeah, I screwed up. That's okay. Um, Let me go back. Let me do the initial. Let me just stop this. Let me go back. And look at that. Alright, so let me just copy this. It'll make life a little easier. Maybe not a whole lot easier, but a little bit. And I want my variable manager up so I can see the names. Yeah, so do this on the initial network. You don't need to do it on the complete network, because you don't really ever see that one pull up when you're running the activity. Alright, there we go. Great. Now I'll do the test activity. Which one is the one that starts it without you having done anything? Test activity. There we go. Fresh start. Alright, awesome. So you can see it pulled router A, which is the third one. It pulled SO1, which is the second one. It pulled switch O2, which is the first one. That's not good. It's good, but it's not. It basically said, "Hey, I'm going to randomly pick a name out of these pools." So that worked great, but it's not consistent. So this you don't. I would probably not want that. So this is where you come back and change this to seed, and then you tell it which seed you're going to use. So name index is the one I want. Let me copy that. It's got three values in it, 0, 1, and 2, which perfectly correlates with 0, 1, and 2. I'm going to change all these to the same seed, because what it'll do is it'll randomly pick a 0, 1, or 2, and it'll use that with all three instances. So if it picks a 2, then it's going to grab all the ones that are AAB, right? Which is pretty cool. So let's do that test activity thing again. And we should see some consistency. That's beautiful. Router 1, switch 2. That's what we want. So let me go ahead and save this before anything goes wrong, because things always go wrong. Sample with variables. And this is a PKA file that will build some checks for checking out skills, but we want to make sure we have a different scenario each time. So at this point we've covered just making sure the names are different. In the next video I'm going to talk about putting network ranges and setting IPs of PCs, switches, and routers.